My wife's family invited me to a fancy restaurant to celebrate our anniversary. I arrived but the room was empty. On the table sat divorce papers and a note. We found out you're infertile. The family line ends with you. Get out. I signed the papers and calmly ordered steak. They had no idea what was coming next. Chapter 1, The Foundation. Blake Morrison stood in his workshop, methodically cleaning the blood from his knuckles with industrial-grade solvent. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the distant sounds of the city, but inside silence reigned supreme. 3 months ago, he had been a different man, a trusting husband who believed in the sanctity of marriage and family bonds. Tonight, he was something else entirely. Blake had built his fortune through demolition and construction, starting with nothing but a sledgehammer and an unwavering work ethic. His company, Morrison Demolition, had grown from a one-man operation to controlling half the major tier-1 contracts in the tri-state area. What people didn't realize was that demolition taught you more than just how to tear things down. It taught you how to rebuild from the ground up, how to plan every detail, and most importantly, how to make sure nothing was left standing when you were done. Ashley Morrison had been the perfect wife on paper. Beautiful, charming, from a wealthy family that had welcomed Blake despite his blue-collar origins. The Peaton family had old money, the kind that came with expectations and traditions stretching back generations. Ashley's father, Gregory Peaton, owned a chain of luxury hotels across the East Coast. Her mother, Patricia, was a socialite who measured worth in bloodlines and bank accounts. Their marriage had started with genuine love, or so Blake had believed. Ashley had seemed different from her family, less concerned with status, more interested in building something real together. For 7 years, they had tried to conceive, spending hundreds of thousands on fertility treatments, specialists, and alternative therapies. Blake had endured every test, every procedure, believing they were partners in their struggle. The truth had come 3 months ago, not through any dramatic revelation, but through a simple oversight. Ashley had left her laptop open and Blake had seen an email thread between her and her sister discussing the plan to keep him thinking he was the problem while she and Kyle Hoffman, Gregory's business partner and family friend, continued their 5-year affair. Kyle Hoffman was everything Blake wasn't. Ivy League educated, born into privilege, the kind of man who had never worked with his hands, but somehow convinced everyone he was indispensable. He specialized in high-end real estate development, often partnering with the Pimpton hotels to create luxury resort destinations. Kyle was married to Rebecca, a quiet woman who seemed perpetually overshadowed by her husband's larger-than-life personality. The fertility issue was a masterful deception. Ashley had been secretly taking birth control while publicly supporting Blake through his infertility treatments. The plan, according to the emails, was to wait until Blake's assets were properly entangled with the family businesses, then divorce him for failing to provide an heir and marry Kyle after he divorced Rebecca. The family money would stay clean, and Blake would be left with a small settlement, grateful for the scraps. But Blake Morrison wasn't the kind of man who accepted defeat gracefully. He had spent 3 months planning, using every resource at his disposal, every connection he had built over 15 years in business. The construction industry was tight-knit, and favors were currency. More importantly, demolition required permits, inspections, and relationships with city officials who trusted Blake's word implicitly. He had quietly placed surveillance equipment throughout their shared properties, hired private investigators to document Ashley and Kyle's affair, and most crucially began mapping out every aspect of their lives, their routines, their weaknesses, their fears, and their dependencies. Blake had learned that revenge, like demolition, required precise planning and perfect execution. Tonight's dinner was supposed to be his humiliation. The moment when the Peaton family would cast him aside and claim victory. They had prepared for a broken man who would sign the papers quietly and disappear. Instead, they would get something far more dangerous. A man who had spent months preparing for war. Blake finished cleaning his hands and walked to the wall where he had mounted photographs, documents, and detailed timelines. Red string connected various points, creating a web that looked like the work of either a brilliant strategist or a madman. Perhaps there wasn't much difference between the two. The restaurant reservation was in 2 hours. Blake smiled as he looked at his reflection in the industrial mirror he had mounted on the workshop wall. He looked the same as always, broad shoulders, calloused hands, the kind of face that had seen hard work and honest labor. But his eyes held something new, something that would have sent chills down Ashley's spine if she had bothered to really look at him in the past 3 months. He pulled on his best suit, the one Ashley had bought him for their 5th anniversary, and checked his watch. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The Pimptons and Kyle thought they were about to witness Blake's downfall. Instead, they were about to attend their own funeral dinner. They just didn't know it yet. Chapter 2. The Execution. Palazzo Rosso was the kind of restaurant where billionaires went to be seen spending money. Blake arrived exactly on time. His expression carefully neutral as the maitre led him to the private dining room the Patants had reserved. The space was elegant mahogany walls, crystal chandeliers, and a single table set for one. Blake surveyed the room with the practiced eye of a man who understood structural integrity. The soundproofing was excellent, the walls thick enough to muffle conversation, perfect for what he had planned as his next move, though not for the reasons his soon-to-be ex-family might expect. On the table sat a manila envelope and a handwritten note in Ashley's precise script. Blake read it aloud to the empty room, his voice echoing slightly. "We found out you're infertile. The family line ends with you. Get out." He laughed. A genuine deep sound that held no humor whatsoever. Blake opened the envelope and spread the divorce papers across the white tablecloth. The terms were exactly what he had expected. Minimal alimony, no claim to Pemberton family assets, and a non-disclosure agreement that would prevent him from discussing the marriage publicly. Gregory Pimpton's lawyers had done thorough work, creating an agreement that would leave Blake with roughly 10% of what he had brought into the marriage. The waiter appeared as if summoned by Blake's presence. "Will anyone else be joining you this evening, sir?" "No," Blake replied, signing the papers with deliberate care. "I'll be dining alone tonight. I'd like your finest steak, medium rare, and a bottle of your most expensive wine. Money is no object. This is a celebration." As Blake waited for his meal, he pulled out his phone and sent a single text message to 5 different numbers. "It's done. Phase 2 begins now." The steak arrived. Exactly as ordered, and Blake ate with genuine enjoyment. The wine was exceptional, and the ambience was perfect for reflection. He thought about Ashley, probably at Kyle's penthouse apartment right now, celebrating what she believed was her victory. He thought about Gregory and Patricia, likely toasting their successful manipulation of the blue-collar outsider they had never truly accepted. They had made one crucial mistake in their assessment of Blake Morrison. They had confused his respect for hard work with weakness, his loyalty with stupidity. Blake had never been weak. He was simply patient. And patience combined with the right resources could accomplish remarkable things. Blake finished his meal and left the signed papers on the table along with a $500 tip for the staff. As he walked toward the exit, he paused to speak with the maitre. "Please ensure Mrs. Morrison receives a message when she inevitably calls to check on tonight's outcome. Tell her that her ex-husband thoroughly enjoyed his last supper, and he's looking forward to tomorrow's breakfast." The confusion on the man's face was exactly what Blake had hoped for. By morning, Ashley would receive that message and spend the day wondering what it meant. Blake believed in psychological warfare. The anticipation of revenge was often more devastating than the revenge itself. Outside the restaurant, Blake's phone buzzed with confirmation messages from his team. Marcus Chun, his most trusted foreman, had confirmed that the surveillance equipment at Ashley and Kyle's various locations was functioning perfectly. Detective Ray Volov, a childhood friend who now worked private security, had verified that all documentation was properly filed with the appropriate authorities. Lisa Rodriguez, Blake's lawyer, had confirmed that the counterwork was ready for filing first thing Monday morning. But the most important confirmation came from Tony Russo, Blake's demolition specialist, and the closest thing he had to a brother. Tony had spent 10 years in the military before joining Blake's company, and his text message was brief. "All charges placed. Building scheduled for tomorrow. They'll never see it coming." Blake smiled as he walked to his truck. The Pembertons and Kyle Hoffman thought they had won by forcing him to sign papers in an empty restaurant. They had no idea that while they were celebrating, Blake was already 3 steps ahead, preparing to tear down everything they cared about with the same precision he used to demolish buildings. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Chapter 3, The First Tremors. Blake's alarm clock went off at 5 a.m., the same time it had every morning for 15 years. But this Monday was different. This was the first day of his new life and the first day of their destruction. His first stop was the courthouse where Lisa Rodriguez was waiting with a mountain of paperwork. Lisa was a shark in the legal world. The kind of attorney who could find loopholes in ironclad contracts and turn weaknesses into weapons. She had been working around the clock since Blake first approached her 3 months ago. "Good morning, Blake," Lisa said, her smile predatory. "I trust your dinner went well." "Perfect," Blake replied. "Are we ready?" Lisa spread documents across her conference table like a general planning a military campaign. "More than ready. First, the nullification petition. Turns out marriage contracts signed under fraudulent circumstances such as one party secretly using birth control while both parties undergo fertility treatments can be legally challenged. We're not just asking for divorce. We're asking the court to declare the marriage never legally existed." Blake nodded. He had hoped for this outcome when he first gave Lisa the evidence of Ashley's deception. "Second," Lisa continued, The property dispute. Since the marriage was based on fraud, Ashley's claim to any assets acquired during the marriage becomes legally questionable. That includes the house, the vacation property, and most importantly, her stake in Morrison Demolition, and the Peton connection. Here's where it gets interesting. Lisa's eyes gleamed. Gregory Pimpton co-signed several of your business loans over the years, ostensibly as a gesture of family support. But if the marriage is nullified due to fraud, and if we can prove that the Pimptons were aware of Ashley's deception, those loan agreements become contracts signed under false pretenses. Blake felt the first warm glow of satisfaction. Meaning Gregory Piton could become personally liable for millions in business debt he thought was safely secured by family relationships, and Kyle Hoffman as his business partner is connected to several of those same agreements. While Lisa filed the legal paperwork, Blake drove to his construction site office where Marcus Chun was waiting with progress reports. Marcus had been with Blake since the early days, a soft-spoken man whose competence was matched only by his loyalty. The surveillance equipment worked perfectly. Marcus reported Ashley spent last night at Kyle's penthouse and they were definitely celebrating. Kyle opened a bottle of champagne that probably cost more than most people make in a month. Show me. Marcus pulled up video footage on his laptop. Blake watched Ashley and Kyle toast their victory, laughing about how easily they had manipulated that blue-collar idiot. Kay made jokes about Blake's intelligence while Ashley mocked his attempts to fit in with her family. There's more, Marcus said, switching to a different camera angle. They've been planning this for longer than we thought. Rebecca Hoffman isn't just Kyle's wife. She's been in on it, too. Apparently, she's having her own affair with someone from Ashley's yoga studio, and they're all planning to use the divorce settlements to fund some kind of commune in Costa Rica. Blake studied the footage carefully. Rebecca Hoffman had always seemed like a victim in her marriage to Kyle, but apparently she was just another predator wearing a different mask. This information changed his calculations significantly. What about the building inspections? Blake asked. Marcus grinned. That's the beautiful part. Remember how Kyle has been pushing Gregory to renovate 3 of his older hotels? The ones where they've been cutting corners on permits and safety inspections? Blake nodded. Kay had frequently bragged about his ability to navigate bureaucratic red tape when it came to construction projects. Well, it turns out that when you really examine the paperwork, those renovations were never properly approved. The electrical work doesn't meet code. The structural modifications were done without permits and the fire safety systems are completely inadequate. A thorough inspection would shut down all 3 properties immediately. And who requested the thorough inspection? An anonymous concerned citizen who noticed some irregularities and reported them to the City Safety Commission. The inspections are scheduled for today. Blake's phone buzzed with a text from Tony Russo. Package delivered to all 3 locations. Gift will be unwrapped at 2 p.m. Blake checked his watch. It was 11:30 a.m. In 2.5 hours. Gregory Pimpton would discover that his 3 most profitable hotels had been declared safety hazards and would be shut down pending extensive renovations that would take months and cost millions. But that was just the beginning. Blake's second phone, the one Ashley didn't know about, showed 17 missed calls from her and 12 from Kyle. By now, they had probably discovered that the divorce papers they thought gave them complete victory had actually triggered a legal avalanche that threatened everything they owned. Marcus, Blake said, closing the laptop. I want you to personally deliver a message to Ashley at her mother's house. Tell her that her ex-husband would like to invite her to lunch tomorrow at the same restaurant where she had the divorce papers served. Tell her if she doesn't come, the photographs and videos we've collected over the past 3 months will be delivered to every society reporter in the city. Marcus nodded. And if she asks what photographs, smiled, tell her we have footage of her and Kyle's business meetings in hotel rooms across 3 states, including the one where they discussed having Rebecca's yoga instructor kill her husband in a staged accident. Marcus' eyes widened. We have footage of them planning murder. No, Blake replied. But Ashley doesn't know that. Fear, Marcus, is often more powerful than truth. By tomorrow, Ashley will be so terrified of what we might know that she'll agree to almost anything. As Blake drove home to his empty house, the one Ashley had redecorated to her family's taste, his phone rang. Detective Ray Volov's name appeared on the screen. Blake. Ray's voice was tense. I've got some news you need to hear. Kyle Hoffman has been asking around about you, specifically about hiring someone to handle a problem permanently. He's not just planning to destroy you financially. He wants you gone. Blake pulled over and parked. This was an unexpected development, though not entirely surprising. Men like Kyle didn't handle being outmaneuvered well, and they had a tendency to escalate rather than retreat. How certain are you about this? Blake asked. Certain enough that I've already assigned protective surveillance to your property and work sites. Kyle reached out to some very dangerous people, Blake. People who don't ask questions if the price is right. Blake felt something cold settle in his chest. He had planned for financial and social warfare, but physical violence changed the rules of engagement entirely. Fortunately, Blake Morrison had learned a long time ago that sometimes the best defense was an overwhelming offense. "Ray," Blake said, "I need you to do something for me. I need Kyle Hoffman to believe that I'm exactly the kind of man he should be afraid of." Chapter 4. Escalation. Blake's house felt different without Ashley's presence. Cleaner, quieter, and somehow more honest. He stood in what used to be their bedroom, now stripped of her belongings, and planned his next moves with the methodical precision of a master craftsman. His phone had been ringing constantly since noon. Ashley, Kyle, Gregory, Patricia, and even Rebecca had all attempted to reach him. Blake let every call go to voicemail, understanding that silence was often the most unnerving response to panic. The hotel shutdowns had proceeded exactly as planned. By 3:00 p.m., 3 of Gregory's most profitable properties were cordoned off with safety violation notices, and local news crews were reporting on the shocking safety failures at luxury Pimpton hotels. The estimated cost to bring the buildings up to code was approaching $8 million. And every day, the hotels remained closed would cost Gregory approximately $50,000 in lost revenue. But the legal paperwork was producing even better results. Lisa Rodriguez had called to report that Gregory's lawyers were in full crisis mode, trying to understand how routine family business loans had suddenly become personal liability nightmares. Kyle's high-end real estate deals were also under scrutiny as several city permits were discovered to have irregularities that matched the pattern at the Piton hotels. Blake walked to his garage where he kept his personal workshop separate from the business equipment. Here, surrounded by tools that had built his fortune, he felt most like himself. The walls were covered with photographs from construction sites, commendations from city officials, and newspaper clippings documenting Morrison demolition success stories. But tonight, the workshop served a different purpose. Blake opened a locked cabinet and removed a laptop that Ashley had never seen. This computer contained 3 months of surveillance data, financial investigations, and psychological profiles that would have impressed FBI behavioral analysts. Blake had learned early in his business career that information was the most valuable commodity in any negotiation. While Ashley and Kyle had been playing their little games of deception, Blake had been building a comprehensive understanding of everyone involved in their scheme. Rebecca Hoffman, for instance, wasn't just Kyle's neglected wife. She was a former pharmaceutical researcher who had been quietly embezzling money from her husband's accounts to fund her lover's struggling yoga studio. The yoga instructor, David Park, had a criminal history that included assault charges and suspected involvement in an insurance fraud scheme. Patricia Pimpton's charity work was largely a facade for money laundering, moving dirty money from her husband's more questionable business partners through fake donations to causes that existed only on paper. Gregory himself had been paying substantial bribes to city officials for years, ensuring that Pimpton hotel projects received favorable treatment. But the most interesting discovery was Ashley's true motivation for the divorce. She wasn't just trying to marry Kyle. She was trying to escape prosecution for her role in a hit-and-run accident that had killed a pedestrian 3 years ago. Kyle had been driving, but Ashley had convinced the victim's family to accept a quiet settlement in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges. The money had come from funds Ashley had been secretly siphoning from Blake's business accounts. Blake's computer chimed with an incoming video call from Tony Russo. Blake accepted the call and Tony's weathered face appeared on screen. "Boss," Tony said. "We've got a problem. Kay hired some muscle to pay you a visit tonight. 3 guys with a reputation for making problems disappear permanently. They're planning to make it look like a home invasion gone wrong." Blake felt his pulse quicken, but his voice remained steady. "Where are they now?" "About 20 minutes out from your location. But here's the thing. I've been tracking them since they left Kyle's place, and I don't think they know what they're walking into." Blake smiled grimly. "What do you mean? Remember when you asked me to set up security for your house after the divorce papers were filed? Well, let's just say that anyone who tries to break into your place tonight is going to get a very unpleasant surprise." Blake had forgotten about the security upgrades Tony had insisted on installing. Tony's military background included expertise in what he politely called perimeter defense, and Blake had given him carte blanche to protect the property. "What kind of surprise are we talking about, Tony?" "The kind that will leave them wishing they'd chosen a different line of work." "Don't worry, boss. Nothing fatal, but they'll definitely need medical attention. And more importantly, they'll have a story to tell Kyle about exactly how dangerous it is to underestimate Blake Morrison." Blake considered this development. Kyle's decision to hire killers represented a significant escalation, but it also provided an opportunity. If Blake could prove that Kyle had attempted to have him murdered, it would destroy any remaining credibility Kyle had and potentially result in criminal charges. "Tony, I need you to make sure we get everything on video. High definition, multiple angles, and audio if possible. I want Kyle's hired thugs telling us exactly who sent them and why. Already taken care of. We'll have enough evidence to put Kyle away for conspiracy to commit murder. Blake's other phone buzzed with a text from Ray Volov. Blake, get out of your house now. Multiple armed suspects approaching your location. Blake typed back. It's under control. Just make sure you're ready to arrest whoever walks away from this. As Blake settled into his favorite armchair, positioned with a clear view of the front door and windows, he reflected on how dramatically the situation had evolved. This morning, he had been planning a careful campaign of financial and social destruction. Tonight, he was dealing with hired killers, but Blake Morrison hadn't built a successful business by backing down from challenges. If Kyle wanted to play with deadly stakes, Blake was prepared to show him exactly what happened when you threatened a man who understood both construction and demolition at a very personal level. His phone rang, displaying Ashley's number. Blake answered on the fourth ring. Blake. Ashley's voice was strained, frightened. We need to talk about what? About the hotel shutdowns? About the legal papers? About all of it? This has gone too far. Blake checked his watch. Kyle's hired thugs would arrive in approximately 10 minutes. Ashley, I'm a little busy right now, but I agree that we should talk. How about lunch tomorrow at Palazzo Rosso? Same private dining room where you served me divorce papers. Blake, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Blake interrupted. You and Kyle tried to destroy me, and now you're discovering that I'm not as easy to destroy as you thought. Kyle made the mistake of escalating this beyond financial warfare. And now he's going to learn why that was a very poor decision. What are you talking about? Blake heard vehicles pulling into his driveway. I'm talking about the 3 men Kyle hired to kill me tonight. They should be knocking on my door any minute now. Ashley's gasp was audible over the phone. Blake, I swear I didn't know. Save it for someone who still cares, Blake said, ending the call. Through his window, Blake could see 3 figures approaching his front door. They moved with professional coordination, weapons visible in their hands. Blake felt a familiar calm settle over him. The same feeling he experienced when operating heavy machinery or placing explosive charges for demolition. Focus, precision, and perfect timing were about to become very important. His phone buzzed with a final text from Tony. Showtime, boss. Let's see how tough Kyle's boys really are. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. Blake watched through his window as 3 armed men approached his front door with the confidence of predators who believed they held every advantage. They had no idea they were walking into a trap that had been months in the making. The first man reached for the door handle and Blake's house erupted into chaos. Tony's security modifications were both elegant and devastating. Motion sensors triggered blinding strobe lights while speakers hidden throughout the property unleashed a deafening alarm designed to disorient and panic. The front porch collapsed under the first intruder's weight. A carefully weakened structure that dropped him 8 feet into a pit lined with industrial foam and equipped with restraint cables. The second man tried to retreat but found himself caught in razor wire that Tony had concealed along the property's perimeter. The third man attempted to breach a side window, only to discover that Blake's house had been retrofitted with security glass that could stop a rifle bullet. Within 90 seconds, all 3 men were immobilized, their weapons scattered, their night vision destroyed by the strobes and their hearing compromised by the alarm system. Blake calmly walked outside carrying a high-definition camera and wearing military-grade hearing protection. Gentlemen, Blake said, his voice carrying easily over the diminishing alarm. Let's have a conversation about who sent you and why. The first man, suspended in the foam-lined pit, tried to maintain his professional demeanor. We don't know what you're talking about, man. We're just here to rob the place. Blake laughed. Really? You drove directly to my address, bypassed 3 other houses that would have been easier targets, and came armed with enough firepower to outfit a small military unit. Try again. Ray Volov arrived with backup just as Blake was finishing his impromptu interrogation. The 3 men faced with overwhelming evidence and the promise of reduced charges provided detailed statements about Kyle Hoffman's hiring them to eliminate Blake and make it look like a home invasion. Blake Rye said as the last suspect was loaded into a patrol car. Kyle just bought himself a conspiracy to commit murder charge. With the evidence we've got, he's looking at 25 to life. But Blake wasn't satisfied with simply having Kyle arrested. He understood that true justice required destroying the entire network of corruption and betrayal that had targeted him. Ray, I need a favor. Can you delay Kyle's arrest for exactly 24 hours? Ray raised an eyebrow. Blake, that's asking me to obstruct justice. I'm asking you to let me finish what they started. Kay tried to have me killed tonight, which means the rules of engagement have changed completely. Give me 24 hours to settle this properly, and then you can arrest whatever's left of him. Ray considered this request carefully. He had known Blake since childhood and understood that beneath the calm exterior was a man capable of extraordinary determination when pushed beyond his limits. 24 hours, Ray agreed. But Blake, whatever you're planning, make sure it doesn't cross any lines that I can't uncross later. After the police departed, Blake returned to his workshop and activated a secure video call with his team. Marcus, Tony, and Lisa appeared on screen, their faces showing a mixture of concern and anticipation. Status report. Blake said. Lisa spoke first. Gregory Pimpton is in full panic mode. His lawyers contacted me directly, offering complete capitulation on the divorce settlement if we'll just make the hotel problems disappear. He's willing to give you everything. The house, the businesses, even Ashley's trust fund. Ashley's trust fund. Blake hadn't known such a thing existed. $3 million held in reserve since she turned 18, but only accessible upon marriage or with family consent. Gregory's offering to sign it over to you as part of the settlement. Marcus jumped in. The hotel shutdowns are cascading faster than we anticipated. 2 other Pimpton properties are now under investigation and the negative publicity is driving away bookings across the entire chain. Gregory's looking at potential bankruptcy within 6 months. Tony's report was more personal. Kyle's been trying to hire additional muscle since his first team disappeared tonight. Word's gotten out that he's poison, though. Nobody wants to work for a guy who sends people into obvious traps. Blake absorbed this information while formulating his final strategy. Kyle had attempted murder, which justified any response Blake chose to make. But Blake's revenge would be more sophisticated than simple violence. It would be complete and permanent destruction of everything Kyle valued. Here's what we're going to do, Blake said. Lisa, accept Gregory's settlement offer, but add one condition. Ashley and Kyle must appear at tomorrow's lunch meeting to personally apologize and sign additional documents. Tell Gregory that if they refuse, we'll release everything we know about his bribes, Ashley's hit and run and Kyle's murder conspiracy to every media outlet in the country. And if they agree to come, Lisa asked. Blake's smile was cold. Then we'll give them exactly what they deserve. Blake spent the rest of the night preparing for what he knew would be the final confrontation. The lunch meeting at Palazzo Rosso would be more than just a conclusion to their legal dispute. It would be Ashley and Kyle's reckoning for 3 years of betrayal and attempted murder. By dawn, Blake had received confirmation that all parties would attend the lunch meeting. Gregory and Patricia would be there to personally oversee the settlement. Ashley and Kyle would be present to sign the apology documents, and even Rebecca Hoffman would attend to provide her statement about Kyle's attempted murder conspiracy. Blake dressed carefully in the same suit he had worn 3 days earlier when he signed the divorce papers. But this time he wasn't walking into an ambush. He was walking into his victory celebration. His phone buzzed with a final message from Tony. Everything's ready. Boss, they have no idea what's waiting for them. Blake checked his watch. It was time to finish what Ashley and Kyle had started. Chapter 6. The Trap Springs. Palazzo Rosso's private dining room had been transformed into a courtroom where Blake Morrison would serve as judge, jury, and executioner. Blake arrived 30 minutes early, wanting to ensure everything was perfect for what would be the most important meeting of his life. The same table where he had found divorce papers now held carefully organized legal documents, photographic evidence, and video equipment that would record every moment of the proceedings. Blake had spared no expense in preparing for this confrontation. He wanted a permanent record of their confession and humiliation. Gregory Pimpton arrived first, accompanied by his wife, Patricia, and 2 lawyers who looked like they had been working around the clock. Gregory's usual arrogance had been replaced by barely controlled desperation. The hotel shutdowns had cost him nearly $1 million in the past 3 days, and his financial empire was teetering on the edge of collapse. Blake, Gregory said, his voice strained. I want you to know that Patricia and I had no idea about Ashley's indiscretions. If we had known, we would never have supported her actions. Blake gestured to the chairs arranged around the table. Please sit. We begin when everyone arrives. Ashley entered next, accompanied by Kyle, Hoffman, and Rebecca. Ashley looked haggarded. The stress of the past few days had aged her visibly. Kyle, however, still projected confidence, though Blake noticed the slight tremor in his hands that suggested barely controlled rage. Rebecca Hoffman surprised Blake with her appearance. Instead of the downtrodden wife he had expected, she carried herself with the poise of someone who had finally stopped pretending to be a victim. Now that everyone's here, Blake said, taking his seat at the head of the table, let's discuss why we're really gathered today. He activated the video recording equipment and placed a stack of photographs in the center of the table. The images showed Ashley and Kyle in compromising positions across multiple hotels and locations, time-stamped and documented with meticulous precision. 3 months ago, Blake began, my wife served me divorce papers in this same room, claiming I was infertile and therefore unworthy of continuing the Peton family line. What she didn't know was that I had already discovered her 5-year affair with Kyle Hoffman and her deliberate use of birth control to prevent conception. Ashley's face went white. Kyle leaned forward aggressively, but Blake continued without pause. Over the past 3 months, I've documented not just the affair, but the entire network of corruption, embezzlement, and criminal activity that connects everyone at this table. Blake placed additional documents on the table. Financial records, medical reports, and legal filings that told the complete story of their deception. Gregory, your hotels have been systematically violating safety codes for years, with Kyle facilitating bribes to city officials to avoid inspections. Patricia, your charity work is a money laundering operation that has processed over $2 million in illegal funds. Gregory started to protest, but Blake held up his hand. Rebecca, your embezzlement of Kyle's accounts to fund your lover's yoga studio amounts to nearly $500,000. And Ashley, Blake turned to face his soon-to-be ex-wife. Your involvement in a fatal hit and run 3 years ago, followed by witness intimidation and evidence tampering, constitutes multiple felonies. The room erupted in denials and accusations, but Blake remained calm. But the most serious charge, Blake continued, is conspiracy to commit murder. Kyle, last night you hired 3 armed men to kill me and make it look like a home invasion. They're currently in custody and have provided detailed statements about your instructions. Kyle shot to his feet. You can't prove any of this. Those men are criminals. Their testimony is worthless. Blake smiled and activated a laptop computer. Actually, I can prove all of it. The screen displayed high-definition footage of Kyle meeting with the hired killers. Audio clearly capturing his instructions to eliminate the problem permanently and make sure it looks random. This video was taken yesterday afternoon using equipment installed in your office building. Did you know that Morrison Demolition handled the construction contract for your building's recent renovations? Kyle, we have access to every room, every corridor, and every conversation. Kay's confidence finally cracked. What do you want? Blake spread a new set of documents across the table. I want everything. Complete financial restitution for all money stolen or misdirected. Public confessions to all criminal activities. And most importantly, I want all of you to disappear from my life permanently. He handed specific documents to each person. Gregory, you're signing over complete ownership of Ashley's trust fund. Your stake in Morrison Demolition Partnerships and the 3 properties currently under safety violations. The estimated value is approximately $12 million. Gregory's lawyers tried to intervene, but Blake cut them off. The alternative is federal criminal charges for bribery, safety violations that resulted in public endangerment, and conspiracy. Gregory can keep his other properties and avoid prison, or he can fight me and lose everything. Ashley, Blake continued, you're signing a confession to the hit and run incident along with a complete financial disclosure of all assets acquired during our marriage. You'll also be relocating to a different state and never contacting me or my associates again. Ashley's voice was barely a whisper. Blake, please, Rebecca. Blake interrupted, turning to Kyle's wife. You're filing for divorce immediately and providing testimony about Kyle's criminal activities in exchange for immunity on the embezzlement charges. Rebecca nodded eagerly, gladly. Kyle destroyed my life years ago. Finally, Blake faced Kyle Hoffman. And you, Kyle, have a very simple choice. You can sign these documents confessing to attempted murder, fraud, and bribery. Agree to serve a minimum of 10 years in federal prison and forfeit all assets to pay restitution, or you can refuse and I'll release all of this evidence to the FBI, the IRS, and every media outlet in the country. Kyle's face was purple with rage. You blue-collar piece of garbage. You think you can threaten us? My family has connections you can't imagine. Blake's voice remained level. Your family had connections, Kyle. Past tense. As of this morning, your father's law firm is under investigation for the same bribery charges that implicate Gregory. Your brother's pharmaceutical company is being audited for the money laundering scheme connected to Patricia's charities. And your wife has already agreed to testify against you in exchange for immunity. Blake stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. You see, Kyle, you made one critical mistake when you decided to have me killed. You assumed I was some simple construction worker who could be eliminated without consequences. But I built my business by understanding how things work legally, financially, and politically. When you threatened my life, you gave me justification to destroy yours completely. The room fell silent except for the sound of Patricia Peton sobbing quietly. You have 15 minutes to sign these documents, Blake said, returning to his seat. After that, Detective Ray Volov and a team of federal agents will arrive to arrest everyone who hasn't cooperated. As if summoned by Blake's words, his phone buzzed with a text from Rye. FBI task force is in position. Give us the signal when you're ready. Blake looked around the table at the people who had tried to destroy him. In 15 minutes, they would all be either his prisoners or his partners in ensuring their own destruction. The clock is ticking, Blake said. Choose wisely. Chapter 7. The reckoning complete. One by one they signed. Gregory Pemberton's signature was shaky but determined. A man who understood that preserving some portion of his empire was better than losing everything to federal prosecution. Patricia's tears had dried into resigned acceptance as she signed her confession to money laundering and agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. Rebecca Hoffman signed her documents with obvious relief. Finally free from a marriage that had been a prison of manipulation and abuse. Her testimony would be devastating to Kyle's defense, and she seemed to relish the opportunity for revenge against the man who had made her life miserable for 8 years. Ashley's signature came last, written with the same precise handwriting that had pinned the cruel note Blake found 3 days ago. But her hand trembled as she signed away her trust fund, confessed to vehicular manslaughter, and agreed to permanent exile from the state. Only Kyle Hoffman refused to sign. I'm not admitting to anything, Kyle said, pushing the documents away. You can't prove I tried to have you killed, and everything else is circumstantial evidence that won't hold up in court. Blake checked his watch. Kyle, you have 3 minutes before Detective Vov arrives with federal agents. Are you absolutely certain you want to handle this the hard way? Go to hell, Morrison. Blake nodded and sent a text message to Ray Volov. Come now, bring everything. Within 90 seconds, the private dining room was filled with law enforcement officers. Detective Volov led the team, accompanied by FBI agents, IRS investigators, and federal prosecutors who had been building cases against the Pimpton organization for months. Kyle Hoffman. Agent Sarah Martinez announced, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, federal bribery charges, and racketeering." As Kyle was handcuffed, he looked directly at Blake. This isn't over, Morrison. My family has money and influence you can't imagine. I'll be out in 6 months, and when I am, Blake stood and walked over to Kyle, speaking quietly so only he could hear. Kyle, let me explain something very important. Your family's money and influence disappeared this morning when the FBI raided your father's law firm, your brother's pharmaceutical company, and your mother's foundation. The evidence I've been gathering for 3 months implicated your entire family in a criminal enterprise that spans multiple states and involves dozens of felony charges. Kyle's face went white as Blake continued, "The hitmen you hired to kill me? They weren't just random criminals. They were federal informants who have been helping the FBI build a case against organized crime families that have been using your family's businesses to launder money. When you hired them to kill me, you provided the final piece of evidence the FBI needed to bring down your entire organization." Blake smiled as the reality hit Kyle. "You're not just facing charges for trying to have me killed, Kyle. You're facing charges for being part of a criminal conspiracy that includes murder, drug trafficking, and federal racketeering. The minimum sentence for your crimes is life in prison without possibility of parole." As Kyle was led away in handcuffs, screaming threats and denials, Blake turned his attention to the remaining family members who had signed their confessions. "Gregory, Patricia, Ashley," Blake said, "you've all cooperated, which means you'll receive the immunity agreements we discussed. However, those agreements come with conditions." Blake handed each of them a final document. "These are restraining orders that prevent any of you from coming within 100 miles of me, my business, or any of my associates. Violation of these orders will result in immediate arrest and prosecution for stalking and harassment." Additionally, Blake continued, "Ashley, your confession to the Hitan Run incident has been forwarded to the district attorney's office. You'll serve 18 months in minimum security prison, followed by 5 years of probation. The victim's family has also been notified and will be receiving the financial restitution you agreed to pay." Ashley's voice was barely audible. "Blake, I know you hate me, but I need you to understand. I never wanted Kyle to hurt you. I never knew about the hitmen until tonight." Blake looked at his ex-wife, the woman he had loved and trusted for 7 years, and felt nothing but cold indifference. "Ashley, whether you knew about Kyle's murder plot is irrelevant. You spent 5 years lying to me, stealing from me, and planning to destroy my life for your own benefit. The fact that your lover escalated to attempted murder is just a natural consequence of the kind of people you chose to associate with." Blake gathered his documents and prepared to leave. "You're all free to go, but remember, I have evidence of every crime any of you have ever committed, and I have federal agents who will prosecute those crimes if you ever cross me again." As Blake walked toward the door, Gregory Pimpton called out to him, "Blake, wait. I know this doesn't excuse what Ashley did, but I want you to understand that Patricia and I genuinely believed you were part of our family. We respected your work ethic and your integrity. If we had known about Ashley's deception, Blake turned back to face Gregory. You knew Gregory. Maybe not the specific details, but you knew Ashley was unhappy in our marriage. You knew Kyle was involved with her inappropriately. And you knew I was being set up to take the fall for something. You chose to look the other way because it was convenient for your family's financial interests. Blake's voice carried no emotion, only finality. You taught Ashley that loyalty was optional and that betrayal was acceptable if it served the family's purposes. Kay learned the same lesson from his own family. The only surprise is that it took this long for their corruption to catch up with them. Blake left the restaurant and walked to his truck where Tony Russo was waiting with Marcus Chan and Lisa Rodriguez. His entire team had worked tirelessly for 3 months to make this moment possible. Boss Tony said, "I've got to admit that was the most beautiful demolition job I've ever seen. You didn't just tear down their lives, you made them hand you the explosives." Marcus nodded approvingly. Kyle's facing life in prison. Ashley's headed to jail in exile. And the Peyton Empire is bankrupt. Plus, you're now worth approximately $15 million more than you were this morning. Lisa smiled. And the best part is it's all completely legal. Every document they signed will hold up in court, and every confession they made was given voluntarily with legal representation present. Blake looked back at Palazzo Rosso one final time. 3 days ago, he had walked into that restaurant as a man who had been betrayed and abandoned by everyone he trusted. Tonight, he was walking away as a man who had achieved perfect justice against those who had tried to destroy him. "Gentlemen, lady," Blake said to his team. "Tomorrow, we start building something new. Morrison Demolition is about to become Morrison Construction and Development, and we're going to create an empire that makes the Peyton organization look like a children's lemonade stand." As they drove away from the restaurant, Blake's phone buzzed with a text from Ray Voloff. Kyle Hoffman has been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, federal racketeering, and about 20 other felonies. The FBI says he'll never see the outside of a prison cell again. "Nice work, Blake." Blake smiled and deleted the message. Justice had been served, revenge had been achieved, and tomorrow would be the first day of his new life. A life where betrayal had consequences and loyalty was rewarded. Chapter 8. The New Foundation. 6 months later, Blake Morrison stood on the construction site of what would become the largest mixed-use development project in the city's history. The Morrison Tower would house luxury apartments, commercial space, and the headquarters of Morrison Construction and Development, a company that had grown from 15 employees to over 200 in the months since the Pimpton Empire collapsed. The morning newspaper lay on Blake's desk, open to a small item buried on page 12. Kyle Hoffman, former real estate developer, sentenced to life in prison without parole for conspiracy to commit murder and federal racketeering charges. The article noted that Hoffman's conviction had been secured largely through testimony from his ex-wife, Rebecca, and evidence provided by an anonymous businessman who had been targeted for assassination. Blake folded the newspaper and filed it away. Kyle's conviction marked the end of a chapter, but Blake had been focused on building rather than dwelling on the past. Justice had been served, and now it was time to create something better than what had been destroyed. Marcus Chun approached with architectural plans for the tower's commercial levels. "Boss, we've got 3 major tenants confirmed for the lower floors, and the restaurant space is generating serious interest from some high-end operators." Blake studied the plans with satisfaction. The restaurant space would occupy the ground floor, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows and an elegant private dining area that would serve as a reminder of how far he had come. "Any word from the City Planning Commission about the Patan properties?" Marcus nodded. "Gregory's 3 hotels that were shut down for safety violations are going up for auction next month. The minimum bid is set at $2 million for all 3 properties combined. Gregory's bankruptcy filing means he can't afford to bring them up to code." Blake smiled. "Submit a bid for $2.1 million. I want to own those properties and turn them into something the city can be proud of." The irony wasn't lost on Blake that he would soon own the hotels that had been used to launder money and facilitate the corruption that had targeted him. But Blake believed in redemption through reconstruction, tearing down what was corrupt and building something honest in its place. His phone buzzed with a call from Lisa Rodriguez. "Blake, I've got news about Ashley's sentencing hearing. She's been granted early release for good behavior and cooperation with federal investigators. She'll be out in 6 weeks instead of serving the full 18 months. Blake considered this information without emotion. Ashley's cooperation had helped convict Kyle and several other members of the criminal organization, which had always been part of the plea agreement. "Has she made any attempts to contact me?" Blake asked. "No, and she's legally prohibited from doing so under the restraining order." She's also required to relocate to California immediately upon release and maintain no contact with anyone from her previous life. Blake nodded. Ashley would have to build a new life from scratch with no family money, no social connections, and a criminal record that would follow her forever. It was a fitting consequence for someone who had chosen betrayal over loyalty. Tony Russo's voice crackled over the construction site radio. "Boss, you've got visitors in the site office. Says they're from the mayor's office." Blake walked to the temporary office building that served as Morrison Construction's headquarters during the tower project. Inside, he found Deputy Mayor Jennifer Walsh and City Planning Director Robert Kim waiting with an impressive collection of documents. "Mr. Morrison," Deputy Mayor Walsh said, "we're here to discuss a proposal that could benefit both your company and the city's development goals." Blake gestured for them to sit. "I'm listening." Director Kim spread architectural drawings across Blake's desk. "The city is planning a major revitalization project for the downtown waterfront district. We need a construction company with the capability to handle a $100 million development that includes residential, commercial, and municipal buildings." Blake studied the plans carefully. The project was massive, larger than anything Morrison Construction had attempted, but entirely within their capabilities. "What's the timeline?" Blake asked. 5 years for complete project completion, Deputy Mayor Walsh replied. "But here's what makes this proposal special. The city wants to partner with a local company that has a reputation for integrity and community investment. Morrison Construction has earned both through your work over the past 15 years. Blake realized that his reputation for honest business practices, the same integrity that Kyle and Ashley had tried to exploit, was now opening doors to opportunities that would have been impossible under the old system of bribes and family connections. "There's one more thing," Director Kim added. "Part of the waterfront project includes a memorial park dedicated to victims of hit-and-run accidents. The park would be named after the pedestrian who was killed 3 years ago, the case where you provided evidence that led to the driver's conviction." Blake felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Ashley's confession had not only secured her own conviction, but had provided closure for a family that had been denied justice for 3 years. "When do you need our proposal?" Blake asked. "The bidding process opens next month," Deputy Mayor Walsh replied. "But between you and me, Morrison Construction is the city's preferred contractor. Your company has never been involved in corruption scandals, never failed to complete a project on time, and never compromised on safety standards." After the city officials left, Blake walked to the construction site's edge and looked out over the skyline. In the distance, he could see the buildings that had once housed Kyle's real estate empire. Now empty and scheduled for demolition. The Pimpton hotel chain had been sold to pay debts, and the buyers planned to completely renovate the properties under new management. Blake's phone rang, displaying Rebecca Hoffman's number. Since Kyle's conviction, Rebecca had become something of an advocate for victims of domestic manipulation, using her experience to help other women recognize and escape similar situations. "Blake," Rebecca said, "I wanted to thank you again for giving me the evidence I needed to divorce Kyle and start over. The divorce settlement included enough money for me to go back to school and finish my medical degree. You don't need to thank me, Rebecca. You were as much a victim of Kyle's manipulation as I was. Maybe, but you showed me that victims don't have to stay victims. I'm graduating from medical school next year, and I've been accepted into a residency program specializing in emergency medicine." Blake smiled. Rebecca's transformation from manipulated wife to confident professional was proof that people could overcome betrayal and build better lives. "There's something else," Rebecca continued. "Kay tried to contact me from prison last week. He's appealing his conviction and wants me to change my testimony." Blake's voice hardened. "Are you considering it?" "Absolutely not. Kyle made his choices, and now he has to live with the consequences. I just wanted you to know in case he tries to cause trouble for you, too." After ending the call, Blake realized that Kyle's attempt to overturn his conviction was exactly the kind of persistence that had led to his downfall. Some people never learned that continuing to fight a battle they had already lost only made their situation worse. Blake's reflection was interrupted by Marcus approaching with a tablet displaying financial reports. "Boss, I've got the quarterly numbers. Morrison Construction posted a 47% profit increase over last quarter, and our contracts for next year are already worth more than our total revenue for the past 3 years combined." Blake reviewed the numbers with satisfaction. The company's growth had been built on the foundation of honest work and fair dealing, principles that had seemed outdated in Kyle and Ashley's world of corruption and shortcuts. "Marcus, I want you to set up a meeting with the bank about expanding our equipment financing. If we're going to handle the waterfront project, we'll need to double our heavy machinery capabilities." "Already scheduled for tomorrow morning," Marcus replied. The bank president called personally to discuss our financing options. Apparently, Having no criminal record and a perfect payment history makes us a very attractive client. Blake laughed. Who would have thought that honesty and integrity could be such valuable business assets? As the sun set over the construction site, Blake felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had not only survived the betrayal that had threatened to destroy his life. He had used it as the foundation for building something better and stronger than he had ever imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. But Blake Morrison was ready for whatever came next. He had learned that loyalty and integrity weren't weaknesses to be exploited. They were strengths that could overcome any betrayal and build empires that would last forever. Chapter 9. Empire Built on Ashes. 2 years after the restaurant confrontation that changed everything. Blake Morrison stood before the completed Morrison Tower, watching as the sunset painted its glass facade in brilliant gold. The 50-story building dominated the skyline, a monument to what could be achieved when integrity and determination replaced corruption and betrayal. The ground floor restaurant foundation had become the city's most exclusive dining establishment. Blake had personally overseen its design, ensuring that the private dining room where Ashley had served him divorce papers was now a space where honest business deals were celebrated and where community leaders gathered to plan the city's future. Detective Ray Volov approached from the tower's main entrance carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the broad smile of a man who had just witnessed perfect justice. Blake Rye said, "I thought you'd want to know that Kyle Hoffman's final appeal was rejected by the state Supreme Court today. He'll never see the outside of a prison cell." Blake accepted the champagne bottle and read the label. A vintage from the year he had started Morrison Demolition with nothing but a sledgehammer and an unshakable work ethic. "Any word on Ashley?" Blake asked. "She's working as a night shift clerk at a convenience store in Los Angeles," Rye replied. "Living in a studio apartment, drives a 15-year-old Honda, and has no social media presence. By all accounts, she's become exactly what she deserves to be, a nobody." Blake felt no satisfaction from Ashley's downfall, only the cold justice of consequences finally catching up to choices. She had chosen betrayal over loyalty, shortcuts over honest work, and cruelty over compassion. Her current life was simply the natural result of those decisions. Tony Russo emerged from the tower's construction elevator, removing his hard hat and grinning with the pride of a master craftsman who had just completed his greatest work. "Boss Tony said the penthouse office is ready for your final inspection. I've got to say it's the most beautiful workspace I've ever seen." Blake rode the elevator to the 50th floor where his new office occupied the entire level. Floor-to-ceiling windows provided panoramic views of the city and Blake's desk was positioned so he could see every major construction project Morrison had completed over the past 2 years. The waterfront development was nearing completion. A $100 million project that had transformed abandoned warehouses into luxury condominiums, commercial spaces, and a public park that had become the city's crown jewel. The memorial garden for hit-and-run victims occupied the center of the park, featuring a fountain where families could find peace and remember loved ones. Blake's phone chimed with a video call from Marcus Chun, who was currently overseeing Morrison Construction's expansion into 3 neighboring states. Blake Marcus said from a construction site in Philadelphia, "I've got news about the Peton properties. The renovations are complete and all 3 hotels are now operating as Morrison Hospitality locations. They're booked solid for the next 6 months." Blake smiled. The hotels that had once been centers of corruption and safety violations were now models of hospitality excellence, employing over 400 people and contributing millions of dollars annually to the local economy. "What about the medical center project?" Blake asked. "Rebecca Hoffman." "Well, Dr. Rebecca Chen now." Marcus grinned at his own name. "Coincidence? She completed her residency and is heading up the emergency medicine department at Morrison Medical Center. The facility opened last month and is already being recognized as a model for trauma care." Blake nodded with satisfaction. Rebecca's transformation from manipulated wife to accomplished physician represented everything he believed about redemption through hard work and honest purpose. Lisa Rodriguez's voice came through the office's intercom system. "Blake, you have visitors in the lobby. Gregory and Patricia Pimpton are here to see you." Blake considered this unexpected development. He hadn't spoken to Ashley's parents since the restaurant confrontation 2 years ago, though he had heard through various sources that Gregory had managed to avoid bankruptcy by liquidating most of his assets and accepting a reduced role in what remained of his business empire. "Send them up," Blake said. Gregory and Patricia Peton entered Blake's office looking like aged survivors of a natural disaster. Gregory's signature arrogance had been replaced by the humble demeanor of a man who had learned hard lessons about consequences. Patricia appeared nervous, clutching a small wrapped package. "Blake," Gregory said, "we know we have no right to ask for your time, but we wanted to see you in person to deliver something that belongs to you." Patricia stepped forward and handed Blake the wrapped package. This was meant to be Ashley's wedding gift from her grandmother. A family heirloom that was supposed to be passed down to her children. Given everything that's happened, we thought you should have it instead. Blake unwrapped the package to reveal an antique pocket watch engraved with the Morrison family name and a date from 1892. How do you have a Morrison family heirloom? Blake asked. Gregory's voice carried genuine emotion. Because your great-great-grandfather Thomas Morrison was Patricia's great-great-uncle. Ashley was actually your distant cousin Blake. We knew this when you and Ashley met, but we never told either of you because the family connection was so remote. Blake studied the pocket watch, feeling the weight of generations of Morrison craftsmanship in his hands. The irony was profound. Ashley had spent years believing she was superior to Blake's working-class background, never knowing she was rejecting her own family heritage. There's something else. Patricia said, we've been following your success over the past 2 years, and we wanted you to know that we're proud of what you've accomplished. You've built something honest and lasting, something that honors the Morrison name better than we ever honored the Peyton name. Gregory nodded. Blake, we failed as parents and as business people because we taught Ashley that shortcuts and manipulation were acceptable paths to success. You've proven that integrity and hard work are not just moral choices. They're also the most effective business strategies. Blake looked out his office windows at the city skyline dotted with projects bearing the Morrison name. Gregory, Patricia, I appreciate you bringing me this watch and I accept your apology, but I want you to understand something. I didn't build this empire to prove anything to your family or to get revenge on Ashley. I built it because it's who I am. Blake turned back to face them. Ashley made the mistake of thinking that because I worked with my hands, I wasn't intelligent. Kyle made the mistake of thinking that because I respected honest work, I was weak. You made the mistake of thinking that because I came from a working-class background, I couldn't understand complex business or legal strategies. Gregory and Patricia listened intently, as Blake continued. But intelligence isn't measured by family pedigree. Strength isn't measured by willingness to hurt others. And business success isn't measured by how many people you can manipulate. It's measured by how much value you can create for your community and how many people's lives you can improve through honest work. Blake walked to his desk and picked up architectural plans for Morrison Construction's next major project, affordable housing development that would provide quality homes for working families. This is my legacy, Blake said, showing them the plans. Not revenge against people who betrayed me, but homes for families who work hard and deserve better opportunities. Not monuments to my ego, but infrastructure that will serve this city for generations. Patricia wiped away tears as she looked at the plans. Blake. Ashley could have been part of this. She could have been your partner in building something beautiful instead of trying to tear you down for money she didn't even need. Blake's voice was gentle but final. Ashley made her choice, Patricia. She chose to see me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a partner to support. That choice led to every consequence that followed. Kyle's influence, the criminal conspiracy, her exile, and her current situation. Gregory extended his hand for a handshake. Blake, I know this doesn't change anything, but Patricia and I want you to know that we consider you the son we should have raised. Ashley lost the best man she'll ever know. Blake shook Gregory's hand, feeling the genuine remorse in the older man's grip. Gregory, you're both welcome to stay for dinner at Foundation tonight. I'd like you to meet Dr. for Rebecca Chun and some of the other people who've built new lives from the ashes of Kyle's criminal empire. As Gregory and Patricia left his office, Blake returned to his desk and opened the antique pocket watch. Inside the front cover was an engraving, Thomas Morrison, Master Builder, 1892. Below it, in more recent script, someone had added Blake Morrison, Empire Builder, 2025. Blake realized that someone, probably Gregory or Patricia, had taken the watch to an engraver and added his name to the family history. It was a gesture of acceptance and recognition that meant more than any apology could convey. Blake's phone buzzed with a text from Tony Russo. Boss, Foundation is ready for tonight's celebration dinner. The private dining room looks perfect. Nothing like the last time you ate there. Blake smiled and pocketed the watch. Tonight, he would dine in the same room where Ashley had tried to destroy him. But he would be surrounded by people who had helped him build something greater than revenge, a legacy of integrity, community service, and honest achievement. As Blake prepared to leave his office, he took one final look at the city spreading out below Morrison Tower. Somewhere in Los Angeles, Ashley was working a night shift and living with the consequences of her choices. Somewhere in federal prison, Ka was serving a life sentence for crimes that had seemed clever until they caught up with him. But Blake Morrison was home, surrounded by the empire he had built on the ashes of their betrayal. An empire that would endure long after their names were forgotten because it was founded on principles that never went out of style. Loyalty, integrity, and the unshakable belief that honest work could accomplish anything. Blake Morrison had learned that the best revenge wasn't destruction. It was building something so magnificent that it made your enemy's victories look like meaningless gestures. He had turned their betrayal into his foundation, their corruption into his strength, and their hatred into his fuel for creating something better than they had ever imagined possible. The watch in his pocket ticked steadily, marking time for a man who had discovered that true power came not from tearing others down, but from building something so strong that nothing could tear it down. Blake Morrison's empire was complete and it would stand forever.